Welcome to the Mind Body Strength Nerds podcast with Dr. Scotty Butcher, a licensed physiotherapist with a PhD in physiology. This podcast is for people with mind-body, psychophysiologic, or neuroplastic conditions, and for the practitioners who help them. NERD stands for neuroplasticity and emotional recovery discussions and stories. Are you ready? Let's fucking go. Adam, man, thank you for coming on the podcast. I am so excited you're here.
Me too, buddy. This has been a little while in the making, so thanks for having me. This is cool.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I'm really excited to connect with you and connect you to my watchers and listeners to really give the perspective of someone we probably don't hear much about in this mind-body space, and that's a chiropractor. Adam, you're a chiropractor,
Right
and you're
on,
doing
man.
mind-body stuff?
Yeah,
That's
I'm one of the
so
few in the
cool.
room when I'm there.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, we connected through the PRT training and
Right.
through Charlie Merrill's course and all of that, and it's been a fantastic journey I've found. I would
Yeah,
love for you to just take a second, tell us about you, tell us about your journey and your path to this work.
cool. I love this. So funny enough, I think you brought up the whole Cairo piece, is that Cairo, I guess innately, or when it all started, was meant to be mind body. And then over the years became, I think, more medicalized in order to, get some legitimacy. All the while, mind body was really bubbling up in the research and the science. And I've always been mind body oriented, even as a young person. When I went through my own chronic pain and chronic symptom journey, it was always mind body. There weren't really names for it, at the time, but actually there was, right? Sarno. I read Sarno's book way back then. Deepak Chopra's, pop culture books were really kind of like, helped me see things. Gabor Mate. So as time went by, I really started to only see the world through this perspective of like neurology, brain, mind, body, and that, basically our experience is manifested in the physical over time. And I tried at the very beginning of my career, which was like 20 some years ago now, was, a good treatment fixes all. And and if we work together long enough, we can overcome chronic pain. But when we're not including that other component, that mind component, we're really missing a lot, and we're really not helping empower the patient. So the work that you and I started doing together um, was sort of the turning point to move me right into that space. And so now it's in all dialogues and all questions, and people think it makes sense.
That's so cool. I love that journey. And I agree. The clients that I see say that to me all the time. Wow, that just really makes sense. And sometimes it's the first thing they've heard that really truly makes sense based on the narratives that they've been given previously from other well-meaning and well-intentioned providers, but maybe just don't have the perspective. It's almost like it's almost like once you're open to the matrix and once you see the matrix and you know it's there, it's hard to
Yes,
unsee, isn't it?
totally. Yeah, absolutely. And then that's part of the art of this, isn't it? Just sort of couching it in a way that our patients and our colleagues can hear, depending where they're at.
Yeah, 100%. So so tell me so you came into this world but you already had a mind body approach to the way you were thinking about things. Were you trained? Like
Sure.
did your chiropractic school teach you mind body, or is this something you did completely on your own?
That's a good question. I think I came into it mind body. Everyone at school knew that. I got into mindfulness. I got into relaxation techniques, breath work, etc. Well before breath work was a thing. Buteyko breathing, all that type of stuff. Breathing pattern disorder. I like to look into that sort of stuff, which was a little bit of an outside perspective at chiropractic college. And then the chiro world seems to have kind of a leans towards functional neurology, maybe. So that was sort of the inroad to it. So looking at how the brain is connected to the body and how the body therefore is connected to the brain. So that was another sort of place that was post grad.
Hmm.
So I just kept moving and moving and moving. Just as soon as I found something that spoke to that mind body piece, I would do it. Like I said, got certified as mindfulness and started to bring that in to what I did. And I taught mindfulness classes. for example. And so over time, it was just me piecing it all together. And that makes us a bit of an outlier, right? It makes, we're the weirdos.
I
We're the
love
strange
that in
ones.
previous conversations you said, yeah, just let your freak flag fly.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
I
isn't
love that.
always easy, right? It's not always easy. And not all of our patients are ready for that. So finding a way to couch that again is been really big. And so sometimes I find that I'm dialing myself back more than I'm bringing it forward. Just
Yeah.
casually. Today we were talking about a patient who was just feeling a lot of full body pain, and I've known them a great deal of time, and they said, "I wonder what's going on. I wonder what happened. I wonder if I'm doing too much lawn bowling or if this and that's happening." And I said, it's interesting, because I don't really perceive that. We haven't found that clinically for you, but clearly something's going on. And didn't she recall, which, was right there at the forefront of her memory, that very recently her elderly mother's um, companion passed away. And not only is there grieving there for her mom, but, there's concern for the daughter. And what did that mean for her? Well, it meant that the mother is no longer um, taken care of during her waking hours of the day by her companion. There's no company. So my patient now has a new role. And as I sort of tried to liken it to her, I said, "You've got a new dependent at 83 years old." And she went, "Oh my God, there it is." And it hit, right? And if we didn't bring that piece in, if we didn't slowly kind of help that person see it, they would be wondering what their problem is or if they've got a new disease.
Exactly. Yeah, I see that all the time. Like, oh, I slept. I must have slept wrong. I must have
Right,
done this, whatever activity incorrectly. I must be sitting wrong. My
right,
posture's bad, and when I sit too long, it hurts, and all these narratives, right? So
totally.
I wonder if from your perspective, I think you have a really unique perspective in coming from the path that you came from, but also having traditional chiropractic teaching and
Yep.
learning. So what are some of these narratives that make you go, what the fuck is going on? Like what are the things that you hear from maybe your colleagues or maybe your clients who come to you who maybe aren't fully into or expecting the mind body approach? What are some of the things
Right.
that you find yourself having to butt your head against?
Oh, wow. Brilliant question, man. So I'll tell you a little story about a really capable patient, strong, young, a health practitioner herself, really gets it. And she gets tension when she jumps on her bicycle, and so even more so, she went on break, on vacation, felt great. Her neck felt amazing. Then we happen to live in a bit of a hill here. There's a lake at the end of the street. So all the roads, all the houses, north of that angle down towards the lake. So she gets home from vacation, jumps on her bike, and by the time she got to the lake, which is only maybe 6 blocks away, her neck was screaming, and she's already into that whirlwind of I got to go home, I got to sleep it off. What the heck is wrong with my neck and all this? So I said to her, remember, super fit, teaches fitness classes, is a trained practitioner as well, really ferocious energy. And I said, well, clearly you're not strong enough to ride a bike. And I caught her off guard. She said, fuck no, I'm super strong. And I said, right, there's something else going on.
Love it.
There's something else going on, so it's that silly thing, like I must have rode my bike wrong, you know, but with no mechanism of injury, right? Or, of course, the big one is I must have slept wrong, or I am sleeping wrong because clearly I don't have the right pillow, or my mattress, you know, needs to be replaced. So then we ask the question, well, when did that start? What was the day that your mattress no longer supported you, kind of thing. There's that one. There's also the idea that all pain has got to have some sort of structural sort of connection, especially when there's no mechanism of injury. That's the key,
Yeah.
right? So I've got a couple patients in here who just keep saying, I just want to know what it is. I just want to know what it is. So, sometimes I have to ride that wave with them and just sort of help them out as we go. I followed up recently with a patient, said, "Hey, how's things going? How's our work going?" She's really busy. She lives on the other side of town, so I don't always connect with her. And she described that, the work really helped, but I still wanted to know what was going on. So I ran into my daughter's practitioner because she's got a high performing daughter in soccer. And I asked him, and he said, clearly it's you've got flat feet. You need orthotics. She got orthotics. She's feeling a little better. There's the answer. So, I'm very happy that you're feeling better, and I'm glad that's working, and I hope it lasts, right?
Yeah. So what's your experience? What's the expected trajectory as you say that with a smirk on your face to say like
Yeah.
good for you. Good. I'm
Yeah.
glad that works for you. What's kind of going on in your mind in terms of what's the mechanism behind all of that type of thing that you see?
Oh, I love that. Because, we have to, I was once her. I was once these patients for sure. For years, I wore, for example, orthotics. Nothing against orthotics. For years, I wore orthotics. And for years, I didn't want to lift too heavy. For years, I didn't want to do these things. And I would meet practitioners who would offer me some sort of support and it would work. Those orthotics got me through like 30 years of stuff, right? And so I have to say to myself, here's a person who is scared, who is uncomfortable, who, maybe they're busy and they don't have time for the work. They're caught up in the frustration and the fear and the forlorn, etc. And you can't just tell someone to stop that. And they meet a practitioner, and with all the confidence in the world, they say, "You're overpronating. You need orthotics." They go, "That's amazing. Hallelujah." They get orthotics and they feel better. So part of me has to say, yeah, that clinical experience matters too, even if the structural story doesn't really match. And so we have to let them have it. And it's not that it's wrong. It's just that ritual of diagnosis and application of some sort of treatment and whatnot made the difference, and it tipped their nervous system into a state of safety, into a state of lack of fear, of knowing, of calm. And then their nervous system, integrated that. And sure enough, they're better.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I had many of those experiences personally, so I'm happy to let those stand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing, and I mean, there's by no means for us in this world, in the mind body space, and those that have been trained in neuroplasticity and the importance of understanding how the mind and the brain and the body and all that work together. It's not that we're saying other practitioners are wrong. It's not that we're saying
Right.
that they're, that the what they've been told is not correct. It just might not be along the best science of what we understand. Because what we know is that a significant number of people that do get hurt or come in with pain get these traditional approaches, get traditional physio, get the whack and crack chiros, get the,
Hmm.
let me just do all the acupuncture physios, let me do, all these things. And they get better, right? They
Yeah,
improve, right?
right on.
And the main difference, what I hear you saying, the main difference is framing what the mechanism is and framing why are they getting better. Do you find that that's important? Like I go on a bit of a soapbox rant sometimes on this, and I try and be a bit, I don't know. I'm sometimes over the top. I try and hold myself back a little bit,
Yeah, yeah,
because again, once you see the matrix, it's there. It never goes away. But for others, they might have those beliefs of, oh, I've got that overpronation, so I need
yeah,
the orthotics, and lo and behold, it helps. Is it the orthotic that helps? And then conversely, is it the dry needling? Is it the adjustments? Is it the
right,
exercise? Is that the thing that helps, or is it something else?
right. I mean, we learn a lot from sham studies and how the ritual is a big part of it. And I can respect a ritual, right? So I can, and if we can change physiology through ritual, and if that means the giving of a needle or the giving of an adjustment or something like that, then that's fair play. You know, I think what I hear you saying as well is I can get on my soapbox. Yes, I want the mechanism to be clear, but mostly so that I can impart upon them that they were the healer.
Yeah.
Because when I'm gone, whether it's retired or whether they move or whether they seek another practitioner, what I'd love for them to take away is this idea that they can heal and they can, in a sense, funnel many treatments, whether it be massage, physio, osteo, chiro, orthotics, braces, etc. Those things all funnel through the same door, right? Their nervous system, their life experience, their beliefs, etc. And then they can heal. And if they can start to believe that they are the healer, then really at this point, it's what makes them feel good that they'll pursue. And then they know it's them versus the it being handed to me. I'm the healer. I'm the one who makes them better. And then when it stops working, now I'm the failure, which, is not always easy to sit with. But more importantly, they find themselves spinning around the drain again, looking for the next fix.
Yeah. Is there anything in your world that just drives you bonkers? Things that, that you hear, let's say other practitioners say that you have to bite your tongue because, you want to play in the sandbox and you want to play well, but at the same time, you've got your ideals and that. Is there anything that you hear that's just crazy?
Gosh, man, that's amazing. Let me think about that for a sec, because I think some of the big ones are that fear mongering from practitioners. And you said it earlier, which I feel like we need a lot of asterisks for our dialogue, like we really do, because they're well-meaning. They're
Yeah,
well-meaning,
of course.
and they think they're extrapolating the data, or they think they're taking, an old wives' tale and making it practical, right? And so, for example, recently, a patient came in and she was seeing a physio on the other side of town relative to me, and we had these neural circuit tests that were positive. She was getting that her nervous system was alarmed. Her lifestyle really was conducive to that, and she had discogenic pain. So she had nerve pain for sure. And I'm saying, listen, I'm not saying you don't have an issue. I'm saying there's a big contribution over here from this neuroplastic piece, the anxiety, the mood disorders, etc. And there's something structural going on. She went back to her practitioner, and didn't her practitioner say to her, "You're never going to deadlift again, ever. Sorry, your workouts are done." And I had to get clarity. I'm like saying, like, hold on, are you kind of exaggerating? They just said, don't deadlift for now. And the answer was, oh, no, 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 you're never going to deadlift again. And then I said, hold on. Well, first of all, I bit my tongue for that visit. It drives me crazy, not because it's not a well-meaning piece of advice, but because the fear mongering in that client, and the kind of clients we're talking, right? They're in pain, they're uncomfortable, they want an answer, and then they're told that they're not capable anymore, and they can't deadlift ever. This is a woman in her 30s. She's never going to deadlift again.
Wow.
It's like, come on, dude. Jeez. And so then the story turns towards, hey, you ski. Yeah, yeah, but skiing's not for a couple months now because now we're in August, right? I said, skiing's bent over at the waist, taking forces from the moguls, from the skis, etc. That's a deadlift in reverse. You pick up your little kids. She's got two young children. I said, you pick up your little kids? She's like, yeah, I do. I said, that's a deadlift still right now, and you're doing it today. I said, so I think that might have been well-meaning advice, in a way that was meant to prevent you to hurt yourself again, but maybe a little too much, especially knowing the character they were speaking that information into.
Yeah, that fear mongering I think is number one for me as well, and
Yeah,
I have always been a proponent of building capacity, building resilience, and
yeah,
for those that know me from some of my past life before I got into a lot of this neuroplastic and chronic pain work, it was on strength and conditioning.
right.
Like deadlifts. My former students will tell you, like I preach deadlifts to the nth degree to the point that it became a joke with that's all I think about. But I mean, you're right. I mean, it's not about the things that we think. When we think something like that, we think, oh, first of all, A, that's dangerous. And B, you've got to be some massive strongman power lifter or whatever to be capable of doing these things. But they're
Right.
basic movement patterns. And we
Right.
shouldn't fear these. We shouldn't fear these basic movement patterns. We should build our capacity in these
Yeah.
movement patterns. We take the time to train them because, like, how would you reframe that narrative? So do you lift your kids all the time? And she's like, well, yeah, but I don't know, deadlifts, or I was told, like, how do you make that connection for someone?
Slowly. So, to our original point, or we're talking about bringing ourselves back a little bit. What I can imagine right now, right here, here's a patient who says, "My other practitioner told me I'm not allowed to deadlift," and then I hit the dial and get super excited and super upset. So now they're feeling threatened by that other practitioner and myself, right?
Mhm.
So first step is to just, validate and acknowledge,
Because you can add
park
to
the
the
bus.
confusion, right? You can add to their, I
Right,
mean, they come in and they're already confused, and you give them a different message, just boom, hit them in the face with it, and they're like,
right,
what the fuck just happened, and
right.
why am I hearing this? And then they shut down, right?
Totally. And now they're feeling judged by both ends and they don't know where to go. And maybe even safer would be to take the avoidant approach of the other practitioner in this case, so that they're at least safe, right? And so in other words, we lose our opportunity. So we let it sit for a bit, we validate, we acknowledge, and then I slowly ask questions, and then we start to highlight, hey, it looks like this is something you can do. You in fact can hip hinge. You in fact can tolerate stress through your spine in that orientation, it seems. And let's build you up a little bit more into that as time goes by. And we literally park it at that point, right there in acute neuralgic pain. We just say we don't have to touch that right now. We don't have to touch that right now. I wonder though, I've seen a lot of patients come out of this kind of pain and resume things like deadlifting and picking up their kids and gardening, et cetera, over time. And in fact, I was one of them. But let's move on, is sort of how I'd frame it.
Right.
And then
Park
as
it,
time
put a
goes
little bug
by,
in their ear, right?
yeah, and don't you notice that a patient, as they start to heal, they come into the clinic or into our space and they tend to tell me those stories. So, in other words, they'll say things like, I did a little workout the other day. Like, oh, cool. No kidding. Right? That wasn't, we hadn't strategized that yet, though. Their confidence was rising, their pain was going down, their body was feeling safe. And what do they do when they're in that state? Well, they move. They do the thing they do, whatever their thing is. And so they come in and report, yeah, I'm thinking about a pilot um, who loves tennis, and he hasn't flown in a while because his back is killing him. But he goes out and tinkers with the tennis ball. And doesn't he feel pretty good when he's playing tennis? Interesting. Okay. So carry on, play more tennis, see how you're doing, and then let's use that as evidence to suggest that, oh yeah, look what you're doing out there on the tennis court. The speed, the power, the rotation, all that stuff. I wonder if we could probably bring that over here. And so start to reframe it slowly over time.
That's beautiful. That's really powerful, and I really think that the language that we're speaking. I mean, we've been trained similarly, in our most recent years. So I mean, the language is very very similar, but it really resonates with me as well. Wow, I have so many questions. Where to start? Okay,
Go, man.
I talked about dispelling. It wasn't dispelling myths, but it was like the narratives, right? Okay, I
Yeah.
just want to do a quick little yes or no answer to a couple things coming from your perspective, and then I'm going to
Oh,
ask you
fun.
about neurocircuit assessments because that was one thing that you mentioned. Okay,
Yeah.
do ribs go out of place? Yes or no?
Oh, I love it. Depends who we're talking to, right? Between you and
No,
I.
no, 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 no. I didn't say it depends. I want the yes or fucking no.
Oh, dude, you're hanging me.
I know.
I'm gonna have to say yes.
Oh, wrong answer. No. No,
I
no.
know.
Okay. Okay, let's talk context. Let's talk context.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's way more important. If someone came into the clinic and said to me, "My ribs out," I'd say, "Gotcha. I understand. That sucks," right? Neurophysiologically, over time, I would explain to them, "Listen, your rib isn't anywhere. We're going to X-ray that thing and it'll be exactly where it's supposed to be. But what's actually happening is there's a neurophysiological protection mechanism. I shorthand that and call it a clench, sort of because people seem to get the term clench
Yeah.
over, bracing's another good one, but bracing can sometimes have a bit of trauma, trauma lens to it, sort of.
I
So
use
I'll
a lot
say
of
you got a
guarding.
clench,
I'll say guarding, but clench I
guarding.
like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
protecting,
Yeah.
clench, like a colloquial term that gets people going, oh yeah, I know the clenches. If you're clenching your jaw. So that area is clenching and it works when you're in that pose, but as soon as you move and the clench is still applied or that guarding is still applied, then don't those things butt up against each other and send that signal to you for sure.
So
So we'll
so
give them
so what I hear you saying is that the rib
no, they
does
don't
not go
exist.
out.
Yeah, you're right, man. You're right.
Thank you.
You
Thank
called
you.
me. You called me on that on Instagram.
I did.
That was great. That was great.
Okay, so on that note, do discs slip?
Oh, God bless.
Yes or no?
No, brother. No, no.
Thank you. Okay, discs do not slip. They don't go anywhere.
I
They're not
can
slipping. They're not jelly
no.
donuts. They're not,
Can you imagine?
yeah, yeah, right? Like,
Yeah.
how would we survive as a species if that stuff would
Right.
happen?
Well, yeah, it reminds me of that cycling practitioner, that really strong one. I'm like, really? The bicycle downhill to the lake is totally ruining your body? Come on.
Yeah. What about
No way.
SIs? Do SIs slip? Do
Oh,
they
go out
they
of
go out?
place. Your SI's out of place. No,
Thank you. Okay.
no.
Thank you. They do not go out of place, but it doesn't invalidate their pain, and that is the message, the
Right.
context that I heard you saying. So, I mean,
Yeah, big
thank you for
time.
that. But it's we hear these things all the time. I'm sure you hear 'em more than I do, even all the
All the time.
time. And it is a bit of a balance of saying, okay, well, that actually doesn't happen. But here's where it fucking pisses me off. This is
Yeah.
where I'll see someone for an assessment for something, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I go see my chiropractor every week." It's like, okay, cool. How long have you been doing that? I don't know, 12 years. What are? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, what's going on? Well, my rib goes out or whatever, some narrative like that, and they have to put it back in place. And if I don't
Yeah.
get it done every week, then it stays out of place, and it becomes more and more and more painful. Right? Common story. Yeah.
Yeah. Gets worse. It gets even more stuck.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it makes me so bloody mad because I know that anatomically that does not happen, and I know physiologically that there is something else going on. And again, not to invalidate their concerns or their pain, but it's
Right.
so harmful for people to believe that our bodies do that, don't you think?
Right. Totally. That, like I said, outside of a severe car accident, your stuff doesn't get misplaced. Like
Yeah,
your body does not just get a bump from a grocery or your pillow or, a little trip and fall, unless we're talking about overt trauma,
yeah,
right? And most of the time when I bring up that overt trauma piece, people go, "Oh no, 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 I didn't. No, I didn't fall. I'm good. I'm good. I didn't fall." So they get it. They're like, "Yeah, I didn't really hurt myself, but I'm going through something in my life, or I've got a habit or a way of thinking or, a way of being that totally creates that sort of guarding or that clench."
yeah. Clench. I love that. I'm going to start using that if you don't mind me borrowing
Oh,
your
I'd love it.
terminology, Adam.
I'd love it,
That's
man.
yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So okay, the next part of the question. I appreciate you playing along with me with that last bit. That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
awesome. That
I
was
knew
fun.
I was going to take it there.
Yeah, good. Okay, neural circuit assessments. I think you mentioned
Yep.
something about doing a neural circuit assessment.
Yeah.
Tell the reader or the listener what you mean by that. What does this involve?
Mm. Okay, cool. So this would be for me, I do this nearer the beginning of the physical portion of the assessment, like after the history. And the way I couch it, the way I explain it is before we touch the body and change things or influence things, which from their perspective they go, right, I understand. We're doing an experiment. I want to see how involved the circuits of the brain and the body are in this situation, in your symptom. And what we'll do is we will have already kind of figured out a strong trigger for their symptom. And they would have presented in their history. Every time I ride a bike from here to there, I get neck pain. Got it. Every time. Check. And then what we'll do is we'll get them sort of in a relaxed position, whether they be seated or lying down on the table or something like that. And we're going to have them vividly imagine that experience. And I'll even say, like, imagine it with all the fixings, the context. Maybe you're in a rush, you're going to work, for example, and there's a bit of rush with it. There's a little bit of your boss involved, that kind of thing. And here you are doing what you got to do. And I'll say, what I'd like you to do is imagine that for a moment and really sense it. And then once I can see that they've kind of got there, I'll say, listen, with your body in this room, not in your imagination, with the body in this room, what, if anything, are you feeling? What sensations are you feeling in your body? And a lot of times they'll describe, especially when the neuroplastic component is strong or even moderately strong, they'll describe their sensation, their symptom in a milder sort of echo of the full-blown symptom kind of way. So then I'll go back and describe it and say, listen, what we just did is we confirmed the contribution of the brain to the body in your symptom profile, which is very normal in symptoms that go on for longer than a few months or so. Why? Because the brain is actually trying to protect you. And what we know is that we just imagined this. You didn't actually do the event. We just imagined the event, which you might think of as a very small amount of that event, just in your imagination. And your brain was protective enough that it actually elicited that sensation and or that physiology in your body in order to protect you strictly from imagination. So it gives us a cue that there's a component of this that's neuroplastic, and that can be helped.
And that can be so mind blowing for clients to come
Yes.
in and go, whoa. I mean, I can't count the number of times someone has said, whoa, this means that this is
Whoa.
actually neuroplastic. Or whatever
Yes.
terminology I've used, right? I might not have said
Yep. Yep.
those words, but wow,
Sure.
this is my brain, this is my nervous system. It-
And that can be helped. And then sometimes we'll go ahead and soften it, depending where they're at, soften the symptom, use a little bit of a safety protocol and whatnot. And then they notice it softened. And part of there's that empowerment piece saying, listen, you can do this. You can do this. We've only just met. And within a little bit of amount of time, with a little bit of guidance, I was able to show you how you can soothe your body with a little bit of work. You know, if they ever struggle with this one, what I tend to use is I use the stomach growling example. I'll just say, what's your favorite food? And they'll say, eggplant parmesan. That's mine. And if I'm foreseeing that I'm going to eat eggplant parmesan in the next little while, it won't take long before I feel my mouth water and my stomach growl.
Mhm.
Now, what I'll tend to do is I'll say, if that were to happen, if you and I were talking about your favorite food, Scotty, what's your favorite food?
Oh, do I have one?
Yeah,
That's
all
a
of
great.
them.
Yeah, all of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you get me thinking about food, and yep, I'm there. I'm already there. I'm
Yeah,
salivating right now just thinking
it's
about it.
happening, right?
Yeah.
We would never think that's crazy. We think that's normal.
Yeah.
We just, if no one would ever say to you, "Oh, we're talking about getting a pizza tonight, your stomach's already growling. What's wrong with you? Do you got some sort of weird disease?" Like, no, we'd go, "That's normal anticipatory physiology, preparing your body to, in this case, digest, right?" So the other piece is the exact same thing. It's your nervous system picking up on an experience that, in this case, is perceived as threatening, and it's preparing you by cueing you to stop through, that we know is inappropriate because you're just lying on my table right now.
Yeah.
That one lands.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what, in your experience, what percentage of clients would you say have a positive neural circuit assessment versus, oh, I didn't really feel anything?
Yeah, yeah. Especially, categorizing that as sort of like a chronic or a longer standing symptom. I'd say we're probably somewhere up in the 75, to 80%, or, maybe just to be safe because I've never studied it, like something like 70 to 80%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even if, especially if we can extrapolate a little bit, and if we need to, and again, when we've got the patient on the table, we get a bit of a different perspective on who and the questions we'll ask. So I might sometimes ask the question, hey, what did you think about? And they'll go, oh, I'm terrified. I don't want to do that. Or was there an emotion that popped up? And they'll say, yeah, I'm super anxious. Or was there a physiology that popped up? Yeah, the pain clamped. So you might not get all three of those, but you might get one or more of those, and you can start to help them understand that there's a contribution.
Yeah, that's amazing that it's not just replication of a symptom that meets what they are saying is the problem. It might identify an even deeper source, yeah?
Check, check. Yeah, maybe it's a way of seeing things. Maybe it's a way, an anxiety, that their body is a little hypervigilant about symptoms on a whole, which is real, and that's normal. Or it could be the pain itself. I had a neat one today, which was almost like a neuroplastic, or sorry, a neural circuit test, but almost in reverse. It was the end of the session, and the question was, hey, what kind of exercise is best? And I get that question all the time, but they kind of added an addendum and they say, what kind of exercise is best? Biking or walking? In my head, I went, okay, they bike or they walk. They're asking me what are their two options out of their choice, right? Not the best in the world. And I said, well, I don't really know, but let's take a sec. And she was seated, and I said, go ahead and imagine yourself walking, really sense it. She's got little ones. And I said, maybe you're on your own, or the little ones can be there, whatever. And so she went ahead and she was imagining. I could see her calm down. She took a breath, she settled. And I said, what do you feel in your body? She goes, my back, like right away. I said, got it. Okay, shake it off. I said, now go ahead and imagine yourself. She has an indoor stationary bike. I said, go ahead, you get a minute of peace. You go to the room with that bike in it. You get on the bike. You got the kids are taken care of. Go ahead and walk yourself through the process of getting on your bike and going for a ride. And I didn't even finish. And she smiled and she went, so much safer. I feel so much better about bike riding, about that bike ride. I guess there's my answer. And I said, you got it. And I sort of shorthanded it a bit. I said, we call that a body yes or a body no. And all we did was we asked your body the question. Just before that, she said, before it all began, she goes, I guess I just got to listen to my body. And I'm like, ah. And I think what we did is we sort of showed her how to listen to her body literally. She was intellectualizing it, right? Which is the best.
Yeah.
More important is which one makes you feel good and safe.
Yeah, that is absolutely amazing. One of the things that I think, someone like you or I have an advantage over others in the mind body space is that we are physical practitioners as well,
Right.
right? That is our training. We can put our hands on, we can diagnose, we can look at things from that perspective. But we're also going to get a lot of individuals who have, as you said earlier today, real physical stuff going
Right.
on. That like they have a real neuropathy that's coming
Yeah.
from their disc or whatever it happens to be, right? And we're going to see a lot of people that let's say they come to you and they say, well, walking isn't safe. So just taking that analogy a little bit
Mhm.
further, walking isn't safe for them, but their job demands that they walk,
Right.
right? So sure, an early win into this is like, okay, well, let's not walk, right? But at some point in time, we know in physical rehab that walking becomes a goal. So how do you make that shift over time? What is your approach? How would you do this?
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. I'm picturing this even with the pilot right now. There's been so much fear, and there's a couple cooks in the kitchen, a couple practitioners who are, presenting the issue in different ways. Is I guess first we got to start with that validation piece. And then, like you said, we got to make it a goal. And sometimes there's a little bit of tough love there. Like next time we catch up, we're going to walk through this together. And I promise you, I'm going to take you through this step by step so that you're not alone. But I have a little bit of a thing where, we talk about somatic tracking in this world. And so sometimes I'll refer to it as somatic tracking in motion and a bit of a graded exposure kind of approach. with motion. And so I present it as a bit of a stair stepping, and I've got a little piece of paper, a document that sort of says, okay, here's our goal, here's where we are. What would the first step look like? And on this document, I've got, imagining, just imagining, not even doing it. And then maybe we're going to move to imagining, but in an upright position, for example, or imagining in the context, the very important context, like maybe driving's challenging. So maybe we're going to get in the car, but not drive, that kind of thing. So stair step them up the way, and also reminding them, encouraging them to kind of lean into that pain a little bit, not to push through physiologically, but to cue their nervous system that they in fact can walk, are able to walk, it's safe to walk and whatnot. I'm reminded of another patient who had 10 years of back pain, particularly related to squash and when they played squash and didn't they had a different life. They got divorced about 10 years ago. Their other life had a lot of squash in it. And and in their divorce, the squash sort of went away, with the relationship. And so the story now, 10 years later, is, I want to get back to squash. I want to get back to some fitness that I love, but I can't play squash because I hurt my back. And my back really gets bad when I play squash. So we had this conversation, the one we're having here about neuroplasticity and allowing the body to be pushed a little bit and reminding yourself you're safe, etc., where it feels appropriate. And that visit ends. It was sort of like a I'll take that under advisement sort of response. And then the next visit comes up maybe 2 weeks later or so. And I said, so, okay, where are we at? And he said, oh, yeah, over the weekend, my daughter and I entered a squash tournament. And I played, I don't know, 5 games or something like that in the span of, a day. And I thought, okay. And, trying not to give away, to show him my cards. I said, how'd it go? And he says, awesome, I'm great. I played all the games. I got like little to no back pain, but more importantly, I felt good about it. And it's like, there's the other version of it is just jump in and prove your brain you're wrong when you've got the confidence and the safety, the perceived safety to do so. So some folks require that stair stepping, one step at a time. And other folks just kind of understand the concept and almost instantly go ahead and challenge that old story and jump right in it. So, in fact, this fella that does the squash thing has done this 2 or 3 times with different issues. I don't think he's seen that just yet, but we'll have the conversation. We'll sort of shine light on it, and then by the next visit, he'll come back and tell me that he's done the thing. He's done the thing that used to be painful, and he goes, "I got it." And then he makes the joke, "It's all in my head."
Let's talk about that. I
Yeah,
love
man.
that you did that. And for those that are listening instead of watching on YouTube, Adam just did the all in my head with quotation marks, of course,
Yeah, air
because
quotes, right?
if you're familiar with anything in this world and the work that I do, it isn't in your head. It never is. It's never made up because that implies that they're doing something wrong or they made it up or they've somehow thought their way into this or it
Right.
becomes their fault and that and what it's fun when you get clients that are willing to joke about and say, yeah, yep, it's in my head. When they're willing to do that, they get it. You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, he gets it. I
yeah.
think he got that he have like a cognitive distortion, a bit of a big word for it, but like he had come to believe that he was broken and that he couldn't, overcome these things. He's got arthritis, he's got a history of injury, etc. And those he needs to carry them forward. And once we shone the light on it, and he kind of went, "Oh, I get it. Like I may very well have arthritis. In fact, I may very well have an old strain or sprain, etc. And also, I can adapt. Those two things get to live together.
I love that.
So
That's
yeah,
so
it's
good.
super fun.
So I want to take this in a couple different directions here. Um, Shoot, I lost my train of thought. Damn it, it was good too, Adam. I was
Yeah.
ready to go. Okay, I know where I'm gonna go. Okay.
Okay.
So you mentioned earlier that you have a personal history with chronic symptoms.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, are you feeling comfortable enough with sharing what maybe some
Oh
of those
yeah.
are and kind of
Sure.
what was going on? What your
Yeah.
path
Yeah.
forward was maybe?
Yeah, cool. That's a big one. I've thought of it, Scotty, but we maybe we're going to crack into something here, you know? As a young guy, the way I would describe it is that I had all the pains. You know, I had back pain, I had headaches, I had knee pain, I had foot pain. I had all the pain all the time. I had eczema, I had asthma, I was anxious, I had sleep challenges. There was times where I couldn't sleep, and it was like really bad. You know, you get kind of crazy when you can't sleep for a while, right? And you get more upset about the fact that you can't sleep than the actual lack of sleep. And I think those are the big ones, right? But it was just like a peppering. And you know, my well-meaning dad would say, "Geez, you're always in pain. Like, you know, you're always complaining about pain." Kind of almost phrasing it in a like accidentally as a bit like, you know, complaining, just kind of being cranky about, you know, different parts of your body. And I was young. I worked in a manual labor job, so like maybe the story kind of looked a bit like you're always working hard, your muscles are sore, and then you're whining. You know, and I kind of thought that was probably it. I'm like, I guess I complain a lot. I don't know. Um, and how did that go? So I would look into it. You know, I went to a chiropractor and they said your SI is out, and they adjusted me. It felt better. Um, and then I went to university. And when I went to university, there was a couple things happening there. I don't know if that's the same for all of us, but part of it was like striking out on my own. Like not only was I going to school, but I was going away from my hometown, you know, and away from the family of origin and all that, right? And the complexity there. And when I got there, you know, did my first semester. And the thing I remember most, there are two stories about that. The thing I remember most was one, I went to a chiropractor there because one day in a lecture, my whole neck just seized up. And the chiropractor adjusted me and it felt better. And I went back a couple of times, you know, and then I felt really good. And then I showed up like a few weeks later, and the front desk just did what they did. They admitted me. And the chiropractor said flat out, he goes, "What are you doing here? Your pain is gone. You know, you're better." And by the way, this chiropractor went on to become a medical doctor, which sort of tracks, right? They said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "You know what's funny is my neck feels great, but I haven't had an asthma attack since we started doing this. Like I can breathe." And he went, whatever. That seems weird. And I went, that seems weird. But I feel good. So I'll see you in a few weeks, kind of thing, right? I went home that Christmas, and my mom would typically get one inhaler per month for me, and she'd put them on the stairs. And when I went home at Christmas, she'd give them to me, and I'd take them back. So I got four inhalers to take back to school. And I said, "Mom, I've got four inhalers that are full at school, and like my back isn't killing me, and my neck feels good, you know." And I love my parents, and they're very well meaning, and there isn't a but. You know, the complexity though of, you know, being a young person, being raised by two people who had a kid is there. And as I'm older now and I can look back on that, I'm like, oh yeah, the dynamic of my upbringing was, you know, strenuous. It was uncertain. There, you know, not we didn't always learn to express our emotions or to feel our emotions. Certainly, our parents didn't learn how to do that, and therefore that wasn't really part of our upbringing, that kind of thing. So I hope you hear me being like super deferential and, and loving towards my parents, right? They never intended anything, but there was a dynamic there. And when I stepped out of that dynamic, I got a really stark contrast of what happened or what was going on in my physiology. And at the time, I didn't describe it as protective or neuroplastic or whatever. I did have mind body hints for sure, because I was always already reading my Seven Spiritual Laws by Deepak Chopra and you know, getting into some of those newer mind body books that were starting to come out at that point. I was in the health field as well, so I would look into that stuff. And so I started to really get it. And I started to really figure out, and it's more so like not just scientifically or like as a profession, but I started to get it for myself. Like, in a sense, tidy up my thinking, tidy up my nutrition, tidy up my movement patterns, start to like, have intention, start to calm the anxieties, that type of thing, start to learn more. And I don't know about you, but like as a practitioner, the more we learn about health and physiology, sometimes the more empowered we become, right? We are the ultimate patient. So I sort of became the ultimate patient. I pursued all the things I was interested in all the way through. And as I did that, my confidence rose. So basically, like, paying psychoeducation at the highest possible level, like profession, and started to really see the matrix, like you said. I saw the matrix well before I knew how to work with it.
Yeah. Or what it was
And
even
as
called.
yeah, that it even yeah, that it even
Yeah.
had a
Yeah.
name
We had
before the movie was
Sarno.
even out.
Yeah. We had
Yeah,
Sarno and we had nothing else, right?
nothing else. And Sarno,
Yeah.
I liked Sarno, and it just went all the way. Sarno went straight to tell me about your childhood
Yep.
and tell me about your relationship with your dad and tell me about your relationship with your mom. All good, but I didn't need that.
You
Well,
didn't
that's
think
a
you did.
lot. That's a lot to ask. Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
So at that point in my career, I wasn't really ready for that level of integration and interrogation. But that's also helps with my process forward because you share the boiler metaphor in your work. I call it the stress bucket, kind of just a metaphor for capacity, right?
Yep.
What I recognized big time was, we can have lots going in. We can have lots, taking up our capacity, lots of stuff creating pressure. As long as we empty efficiently. So I think my observation for self was I had a lot going in,
Yeah.
mindset stuff, stress, tension, old beliefs and stories, old dynamics and relationships that was kind of pounding and filling up my stress bucket. But I became an expert at emptying my stress bucket. Physical movement, nutrition, mindset, attitude, observing my traits and behaviors and that kind of stuff. And then sure enough, later on, don't we learn about the seven F's and we learn about, fear and anxiety and all that other stuff in our training around chronic pain and chronic symptoms and whatnot. So that I feel like I was my first patient and probably my most successful patient at this point.
Yeah.
And even had to change I wrote a book, and in the book I described that guy and that young man that I once was. And I would tell you that about 10 years ago, I believed I had all the things.
Yeah.
Not only did I have chronic pain, but I had the flat feet, I had the out SI joints, I had the out ribs, and I had them in succession all the time. Chronic tension headaches, digestive issues, pain in my gut all the time. I had all the diseases and I believed it.
Yeah.
And now I look back on it going, wow, I believed it. I was bought in. And there had no reason to not be bought in. We went to all the physicians in our small town and they said, we think you must have a gut dysfunction or something. And I went, oh, gut dysfunction. Shoot. SI joint dysfunction. Oh, shoot. Right. I stand here now saying to you, I don't think I ever had any of those. I
Ah,
think, and I don't think I was broken and I don't think I was wrong at that time.
right. I
That's
love
where I was.
that last little bit that you said there, that I
Yeah,
don't think I was wrong at the time. That's such a crucial point
totally.
because our clients truly believe that their pains, their issues, the gut issues, the
Right.
all the things are absolutely real. They are physical and they
Yeah.
are the problem. And
Yep.
they are not wrong.
Yep, 100%. To say that it's stress, which in the long game, as you heard with my bucket story there, the long game was that it was, yeah, stress or coping, limitations in my ability to cope energetically, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was stress, but I had a gut dysfunction. My bowels clenched, man. I
Hmm.
just didn't have a disease.
Oh, I love that. I love that reframe. It's such an
Yeah,
important one because when we start putting syndromes on everything and diseases
yeah,
on everything and dysfunctions on everything, then this language, I really believe language is very important when it comes to these things. And so
truly.
I get a little bit soapboxy on, like I said earlier, on dispelling some myths and just
Yeah,
trying to change the language around things because I don't want people to feel that their bodies are fragile. And I want
100%.
them to know that we have resilience and that, yes, these things are real, these things that are happening, but they are a byproduct of everything else that's going on with your nervous system, which, I mean, stress is part of that, 100%.
Sure.
But is it the only part of it? No, of course not. It's not the only part of it. It's so much complexity to it.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
totally. I usually tell people that you are a good body working a little inefficiently right now. In other words, you're well, working wrong. A good body working wrong is sort of like how I can sometimes shorthand it to sort of take the disease story out of it, which would be more like a bad body working as a bad body should. It's like, no, your body's solid. You're doing great. It's working a little funny. It's got some clenches, some braces, and some places where it's a little too tight
Yeah.
as an
So,
outcome.
oh, totally. So, in terms of the way that people would work with you, like when we take the trainings and on all the
Mhm.
things, and not just the PRT type training and the neuroplastic type training, but I mean, you've trained in mindfulness. I've trained in mindfulness.
Yeah,
There's been lots of things that we do. I'm just curious how this all comes together in a treatment session for you, and how deep do you go into things like, oh my God, the swear word, emotions. Oh yeah, very scary, right?
easy,
Um,
buddy.
and child, the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, which
Yeah,
which as you said, you had, even though you didn't really think of it that way, but when you reflect, you can kind of, how
100%.
much, like we can do things really superficially, like we're
Yep.
trained to kind of start with the a really good assessment and then the psycho ed and all that, and then it can go into varying different directions. What does it look like to work with you?
Yeah, I love that question. Changes all the time, based on the patient or based on where I'm at in the moment as well. I'm very clear that I'm really good at flagging the ACEs, so that adverse childhood experience. And over the years, I've become far less, it's sometimes hard to ask that question, especially when I was less trained. Sometimes the question can come off accusatory or in a way that sounds judgmental to the patient, especially if you don't know how to catch that. So now I'll go headlong into it and I'll just simply ask, hey, would you have described your childhood as stressful? Yeah. Okay, great. That makes sense because, your nervous system will see the world through that lens. Um, and often we'll talk to people who are maybe in the position to get some therapy around things or to go look at it in a different way. But even just today, when I was describing the individual whose mother's companion has recently passed, the woman had said that the patient that was in the room had said to me, I never put that together. And I said, remember, this has only been around for a week. Your body was trying to share something with you, and it just took you a little while to name it. So your physiology is just the body portion of your emotion. And you hadn't yet had the cognitive experience of the emotion. You'd had the physiological experience. So I'll just use that definition often of emotion to kind of normalize emotion and just sort of make it boring and plain. Like, an emotion is a cognitive awareness of a physiological experience in context. So I bring that up all the time with people and try to make it into widgets
Yeah.
almost, so that people can go, oh, yeah, I had a physiology. I'm like, yeah, you did. And your physiology corresponds with some anxiety and some fear, well-meaning for a mother, a woman you love, and for yourself, who's now going to be overloaded with responsibility. Interesting, right? That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
When we can highlight it, people can soften, they can soften.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, really cool. I really think that it's an underutilized connection that we can make. And I do think seeing the matrix for what it is, I haven't used that analogy yet. It just sort of, it made sense for you. I don't know. Are you a Matrix fan or am I just like flying
Oh
blind?
yeah,
Okay.
totally,
Yeah,
totally.
Neo's
Of
the best.
course.
Yeah. Yeah. Or
Sci-fi,
Trinity, actually. I like
all in.
Trinity. Yeah, Trinity's good. Anyway, so back to where I'm going. We see the Matrix for what it is, but
Yeah,
a lot of clients don't, and they don't necessarily know that they need to go there. And other practitioners, I find, are hesitant to talk about these things, right? They're very hesitant to talk about childhood. They're hesitant to talk about emotions. And I'm talking practitioners in the physical rehab world like we are,
sure.
right?
Yeah,
And it's because they don't. I mean, first of all, scope of practice is we're not psychologists, we're not psychotherapists, we're not going down that path. We're not going to counsel someone, but what we are going to do is help them understand how these very, as you say, physiological experiences
right,
relate to what their symptoms are, and the connection there is the emotions and the experiences that they've had in
right.
as a childhood. So
Yeah,
it's
that
do,
is
do
an
you,
emotion.
do you get a lot of resistance from anyone with this type of thing?
I would say maybe when I was less trained some time ago, right when we flag the emotion as that weird thing floating around in your head, or molecules of emotion, that somehow emotions are these strange things. I would say so because I get it. That stigma piece came up a lot. And now when I talk about emotion as just simply a physiological response to a lived experience, body and mind, that people are very quick to acknowledge that, almost appreciative, because they don't have the eyes for it in that moment. Maybe they haven't been trained to listen to their emotions, or maybe this is a particularly hard emotion, which for a moment they're, denying or not able to see, right? Why wouldn't they show up at our office in that case? Because if they had already processed that emotion and the physiology dissipated, then they wouldn't have made it to our space, but a lot of times they needed that moment of going, hey, how does this connect? You know?
Yeah.
There was a gent who was in here recently who wanted to climb the CN Tower, right? You know what the CN Tower is out there, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good, good.
We're for
So
our
he wanted
listeners.
to,
We're both
yeah,
Canadians. Adams is from
right,
Toronto, and I'm from
yeah,
Saskatoon. But
right,
yeah, we don't have towers like that over here. It's pretty flat over here.
yeah, right. So he was going to be on a team to climb the CN Tower, right? And at the same time, he was in a place where he was about to retire or wanting to retire from a job that sort of he'd outgrown. And it was sort of time to retire, but his boss wouldn't let him. And so he was in this weird place where he was trying to retire, trying to stand up for himself, so to speak, trying to take his life in his own hands while climbing, training for climbing of the CN Tower at the same time. And as we did our neural circuit testing, as we already talked about today, I said to him, imagine this climb in the context of what's going on in your life. And I said, you've got this sort of situation going on at work. And I said, that's kind of a little bit meh, because he hadn't alluded too much and I didn't know what to say. And I said, and you've got this engagement with your boss that seems to be slightly undermining of your capacity to make a choice for yourself. I'm kind of just shooting in the dark, trying to identify with this patient a little bit. And he's on the table, eyes closed, following my instructions and imagining. And as I said, you've got this thing going on with your boss that feels a little undermining. He gave me a laugh. He went, you're good at this, right? And that
Yeah,
wasn't the goal, but the goal was to validate this guy, to bring it into his picture. And as soon as he brought it into his picture, it's like he clicked. He
yeah,
got to see the cognitive portion of this physiological thing that was going on for him. And when I asked him, by the way, I said, hey, what do you notice in your body? He goes, I'm tired. I'm tired. Like the guy just got to be seen for a moment, in a really kind of non-threatening sort of way without me sort of stuffing emotions down his throat or anything like that. Just in a way to say, hey, that physiology and that experience sort of, they're kind of the same thing. And now that you know you're tired, now that you feel this way, I bet you'll make a different decision or a new decision.
yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful, and what a great testament to the work you do too. Is
Oh, thanks, man.
not that you needed the client to to tell you that you were good at your job, but just to see that connection and that click. And
Yeah,
I would be willing to bet you get that type of click often with your clients in the way
yeah,
that you t describe the way you work, which is
totally.
amazing.
Yeah, it's cool. Thanks, man. It's true.
Yeah,
It's true. It
yeah.
is nice to see, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, this has been absolutely fantastic, Adam. I want to wrap up just by asking two questions for you. First one is I always ask all my guests, what is the weirdest neuroplastic symptom you've ever had? And this is like something that, could have been before you were trained and then you realized, I know you talked about some of that stuff, but is there anything recent that you know is, well,
Mm.
oh, this was neuroplastic? And that it just kind of came on in a strange way.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'd love to have something like wacky because I'm all for sci-fi wacky, but I think I had something a little bit more like wow and interesting. So where a patient came in with face or jaw pain, as they were calling it. And in the physical evaluation, I was palpating around in the jaw muscles, a little bit of intraoral, so looking into the cheek. And didn't we find the muscle right here was incredibly tight? That little muscle. I wish I could remember the Latin name of it. If you got to tell me. But the one that connects, the bottom of your mouth to down here, that would make you look like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it activated. And they said, "Whoa, there it is. That's whatever you're touching is the thing." And I said, "Okay, all right." I said, "I wonder what's going on lately that is either maybe making you feel really sad." And they said, "It's not sad. I feel nauseous when you touch it." I said, "What's disgusting you right now?" And they said, "Oh, got it. Got it." So whatever was going on for them in their life at that moment in time, there was a disgust with the behavior of the managements in their small boutique firm and the way in which there's a power dynamic that was super abusive. And it was disgusting. It wasn't even an abuse. They were not offended, they weren't harmed. They were disgusted by the behavior of that management towards the folks that worked under them and for them at that time. And as we kind of highlighted that, I said, let's work on the body with the context of understanding that again, you're not broken. Your body is expressing something that, and she almost finished my words that she can't say out loud because she can't. She unless she wants to get fired,
Yeah.
you know. And so we needed to find a new way for her to express that disgust so that it didn't have to live in her body anymore, but in a way that didn't get her fired, which was
Yeah.
kind of cool. But she was kind of marveled at it. I sort of marveled at it because we just followed the steps and followed the inquiry. And sure enough, there it was. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. That's amazing. Love that story. All right. Last thing. Is there anything else that you think, one key takeaway message that you want to leave listeners? And this could be directed towards other practitioners because I get a mix of practitioners and clients and patients and that sort of thing. Just one message that you wish everyone should know.
That's nice. You're not broken. You're okay. And you can do this.
Yeah. What a great way to wrap that up. So, how I know that people are going to want to get a hold of you and hear more about your work. How do we get in touch with you? What's the best way to reach you?
Cool. You can check out my website. It's myname.com. It's dradambletsoe.com. Or you can find me on Instagram, probably liking Scotty's stuff.
Appreciate that. Yeah, yeah, I like that, man. Yeah, your reels have been very good these lately. I've been appreciating what you've been doing too. So
Thanks, brother.
awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, and thanks everyone for tuning in. And Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure. Amazing conversation as usual. I expected nothing less, and I know everybody's going to get a lot of good information from this. So thank you again.
Thanks, brother. Thanks, Scotty.
Thanks for listening to the Mind Body Strength Nerds podcast. I know you found some value in your time here, so please like, comment, and subscribe to help me spread the word about the power of neuroplasticity.